This is Wretched Radio with Todd Friel.
What is intersectionality, you ask? This is Wretched Radio, and this is Ben Shapiro.
Intersectionality is a form of identity politics in which the value of your opinion depends on how many victim groups you belong to. At the bottom of the totem pole is the person everybody loves to hate, the straight white male. And who's at the top? Well, it's very hard to say because new groups claim victim status all the time. No one can keep track. So, how does this intersectionality thing play out? Something like this. Let's say you're a gay white woman. Your opinion matters, but less than that of a gay black woman. Why? Because while all women are oppressed by the patriarchy, and all gays are oppressed by the heterosexual majority, blacks have a victim status that whites obviously don't. Of course, a gay black woman's victim status is less than that of a black trans woman, who ranks below a black Muslim trans woman, and so on. The more memberships you can claim in oppressed groups, the more aggrieved you are, and the higher you rank.
You tracking that? That's intersectionality. You identify all of the different aspects of your person that are not white, European, Christian, male, and that gives you another intersection, another mark, which makes you more and more and more oppressed. This has been taught on university campuses now for decades.
Get it? Good, because it's about to get even more complicated. Intersectionality takes your victim status and uses it as the basis for creating alliances with other victim groups. 30 or 40 years ago, activists encouraged racial solidarity among blacks to combat oppression. But today, that's not enough. Today's activists demand blacks make common cause with other allegedly oppressed people, gays, lesbians, transgenders, Palestinians, Native Americans, whomever. Here's the logic. A black gay and a Hispanic gay may not belong to the same victim group racially, but they do belong to the same victim group on the basis of their sexuality. By focusing on the places where various victim identities intersect, intersectionality creates a united us versus them paradigm, righteous victims rising up together to fight the oppressor, those dreaded straight white men. This explains why at a rally protesting the treatment of Palestinians by Israel, you might see a contingent of lesbian activists. That's intersectionality at work. They're so united by their victim status that it doesn't matter if Islamists throw gays off of buildings or murder female family members who defy their father's wishes. Victim solidarity trumps all other considerations.
I might suggest there's something else at play there when we consider that this battle is in the heavenly realms. This is a light-darkness battle that is going on. This is to undermine any family structures. Family is God's idea. Family is something that is a key component to a culture. Sex, intimacy, gender issues, all very biblical. And all of these movements are intended to rewrite, to deconstruct, and let people do and be whatever they identify as, say what they are, and that's what they actually become, to tear down family. I know, this gets bandied about too often on some programs, but this is satanic, is what it is. This is Satan will try to undermine anything that is godly and good. And that is a big part of this, which is why you will see these different groups with feminists and Muslims together. Feminists and Muslims together. There are currently 10 women in Saudi Arabia who have a driver's license. Maybe there's more this week, but it was up to 10 last week. What do feminists say? Nothing. Because they're all fighting toward the same goal. Darkness fights against light.
The term intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, a professor of law at Columbia University. She explains that intersectionality was my attempt to make feminism, anti-racist activism, and anti-discrimination law do what I thought they should, highlight the multiple avenues through which racial and gender oppression were experienced. To Crenshaw, America is a terrible place full of victim groups, each with their particular set of grievances. Why shouldn't these victim groups get together and form a political coalition unified by the belief that the majority society has harmed them? That some professor tucked away in an ivory tower would come up with this nonsense is not surprising. What is surprising and disturbing is that so many people actually go along with it. America is the most open, least racist nation on the planet. That Professor Crenshaw is free to spin her nonsensical theories and get paid well for it should offer adequate proof of that. And since when do you have to live someone's experience in order to understand them? You don't have to live as a slave in order to understand that slavery is cruel and wrong. You don't have to live as a woman in order to recognize the evil of rape. Finally, and most important, intersectionality promotes the biggest hoax of all, that we aren't individuals who are to be judged on the basis of how we act, but are merely members of groups to be judged on the basis of our group identity.
That is intersectionality. Back to our textbook. It's being taught at a Christian university for Christian, not biblical, radically different Christian counseling. They've told us that oppression is a systemic issue. Not only that, it's violent. Quote, a concept related to social injustice and oppression is that of structural violence, sometimes referred to as institutional oppression. The marginalization that results from oppressive institutions. Structural violence results when social, political, economic, and other institutional entities and processes intentionally or unintentionally erect barriers to development, wellness, dignity, and human potential. Structural violence can be overt, although it is often covert, making it harder to detect. I fear that where this conversation is going, because this just has to be broken down. Because a part of this argument, you get that. Of course we don't want barriers for people. Define a barrier. Define a barrier. If I go to apply for a job that's a 9 to 5 and I say, look, I'm a noon to 8 kind of guy, and they don't hire me, they didn't put up a barrier. It's the way they do it. That's the way it works. I don't conform. I don't get the gig. That's not a barrier. That's not oppression. So we need to define what these things are that they're calling barriers. We don't want human beings to not have dignity because they're image bearers. We want people to really exercise their actual potential and use their God-given gifts to make the planet a better place, to serve people, to propagate the gospel of Jesus Christ. We want all of that, but what's a barrier? Examples, here it is, of structural violence include providing insufficient funding to inner city and rural schools, limiting access to healthy and affordable food, accepting high unemployment rates for certain minority groups, limiting access to quality health care and preventative care, and making it difficult to find affordable transportation. I think we've been working toward virtually all of those pretty hard. And everybody's aware of that. One particular insidious example is the exclusion of gender reassignment surgery for transgender individuals. That's why we need to get into the details. What are you talking about? What are these barriers? What's this structural violence? Well, they would say that if you don't pay for somebody to become a different gender, so they think, well, then you're being violent by oppressing somebody. So sorry, but the devil is going to be in the details. It really is. And these generalizations I find to be so entirely unhelpful, which is why argumentation is the issue. That is the theme of this hour-long diatribe on this subject. Sharpen the argument. Get better at it. From the article. Privilege is made up of several components, such as having power, access, or unearned advantage and holding a majority status. No argument for me. Access relates not only to monetary and material possessions, but also to opportunities. Everybody wants equal opportunity. I don't think there's anybody opposed to that. Having connections, receiving favorable treatment, and possessing entitlement all relate to having an unearned advantage, whereas majority status has to do with being not only the majority in number, but also the majority in social standing and having the power to define who is who. Those things are privilege. You're right. And there's some people who've got more than me, and I've got some that are more than others. That's just the way that God has ordained the system. And I'm not going to be envious. I'm not going to covet my neighbor's privilege. One of the big issues that I think needs to be addressed in this cultural conversation about racism is the difference between external and internal. I have not read anything in any of these pieces of literature that even hint that there's an internal problem with some people who are saying that there's social injustice. Everything's external. Problem is out there. The problem is that people. The problem is that system. The problem is that program. Now, every Christian should be willing to deal with any sort of injustice if the case is made. My plea, make the case specifically, thoughtfully, not assumption, not reading hearts, not covert, but make it really clear. And I promise you, everybody will join in wanting to upend that sort of system in practice. But you've got to make the case. And might I also consider some transparency in saying there's some other reasons why some of these things are broken. Being willing to deal with some of the things as an internal problem and not merely as an external problem, and let the dialogue continue lovingly. Until tomorrow, go serve your king. Thank you very much for watching one segment. You can listen to 3 more, well, if you can stomach it, for free at wretched.org, iTunes, Android, whatever your listening device is. If you have a plate in your head, you can pick up the program from anywhere around the world, thanks to the ongoing monthly support of our gospel partners. Should you be one of the people who has listened to the program for an extended period of time, meaning more than once, would you please consider becoming a gospel partner so we can continue to proclaim the good news of the gospel? Simply visit wretched.org.